Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving right into what is honestly a wild corporate thriller. We're talking about the company that completely defined the direct-to-consumer DNA revolution. It's a story packed with incredible scientific ambition, massive financial swings, and, well, deeply personal data. Talk about your ultimate Silicon Valley whiplash. I mean, how exactly does a revolutionary biotech unicorn go from a massive $3.5 billion valuation at its peak all the way down to a delisted penny stock filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in just 4 short years?
Section 1, The Promise of Genomics, Democratizing DNA. Let's look at where this all started. Back in 2006, founder Anne Wojcicki, who was drawing on her background in molecular biology and healthcare investing, had this totally radical vision. She wanted to bypass the traditional medical gatekeepers. The goal? Empower everyday consumers to directly access, interpret, and actually benefit from their very own genetic information.
Okay, let's dive into this. At first, these sequencing kits were priced at a pretty prohibitive $1,000. But once the company slashed that price down to just $99, boom, it catalyzed massive mainstream adoption. At one point, they were literally selling up to 18,000 kits in a single day, rapidly building this unprecedented crowdsourced genomic database. Of course, moving fast and breaking things in healthcare? Yeah, that always attracts regulators. 23andMe faced some severe hurdles, culminating in a 2013 FDA warning letter that completely halted their health testing. But you have to hand it to them, they rebounded impressively. They navigated that complex regulatory landscape and secured landmark clearances. We're talking the first direct-to-consumer carrier test for Bloom syndrome in 2015, authorized reports for 10 genetic health risks in 2017, and by 2020, even pharmacogenetics, which is essentially testing how your specific DNA affects your response to certain medications. Section 2, The Business Model Trap and the Public Market Paradox. Which brings us to the business side of the story, a phase that seemed totally unstoppable. In 2021, riding high on all those regulatory successes and a massive user base, 23andMe went public via a SPAC merger. Backed by Richard Branson, this transaction valued the company at a staggering $3.5 billion. But here is the fundamental flaw hidden in their core product, and it's a critical lesson for literally any business. DNA testing is a non-recurring event. Once you, as a customer, spit in that tube and get your genetic profile, there is really no clinical or commercial incentive to ever buy another test. So, to fix this glaring lack of recurring revenue, they tried some incredibly expensive, capital-intensive pivots. They launched an internal drug development division backed by a $300 million investment from pharma giant GSK. They acquired Lemonade Health to build out a telemedicine ecosystem, and they pushed really hard on premium subscription tiers. But the research and development burn rate was massive. And honestly, kit sales were still declining. Section 3, The Data Breach and Network Amplification. Fast forward to late 2023, and that financial strain was compounded by a devastating crisis. A highly sophisticated cybersecurity breach fundamentally shattered consumer trust and threw the entire company into legal chaos. Let's walk step by step through the mechanics of this hack, because it's wild. The hackers didn't actually breach the core database directly. Instead, they used a technique called credential stuffing, basically reusing passwords exposed in other totally unrelated breaches to access about 14,000 direct user accounts. But from those specific accounts, they scraped the interconnected DNA relatives network, ultimately exposing the highly sensitive profiles of 6.9 million people. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the math behind the breach. 492.8. That is the staggering network amplification ratio unique to genetic platforms. A single hacked account cascaded into nearly 500 exposed relatives. A tiny fraction of compromised accounts ended up exposing this vast web of biological data. And the chilling reality of this breach is who was targeted. Hackers specifically organized and sold datasets on dark web forums based on ancestry. They were explicitly targeting Ashkenazi Jewish and Chinese ancestry profiles during a period of rising global tensions. It really highlighted a dark, unforeseen consequence of building a global genetic network. Section 4, Bankruptcy and Fallout. The perfect storm. Because the fallout from this breach immediately accelerated the company's financial ruin, sparking a rapid corporate collapse and a governance crisis unlike anything we've really seen before in biotech. Here's how that perfect storm hit. In September 2024, after months of strategic gridlock over Wachki's plan to take the company private, the entire independent board just resigned en masse. By November, 40% of the workforce was laid off, and by March 2025, the holding company officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Naturally, the legal and financial penalties stacked up instantly. There was a £2.31 million fine from UK and Canadian privacy watchdogs and a $50 million US class action settlement approved in early 2026. Oh, and for anyone watching from Canada, this is highly relevant. The deadline for the Canadian class action settlement claims is fast approaching on June 25, 2026. Don't miss that. Section 5. A controversial nonprofit rebirth. Just when the story seemed totally over, we enter this unprecedented final act. Through a controversial maneuver to acquire the company's remaining assets via a Section 363 bankruptcy auction, which is essentially a court-supervised fire sale, 23andMe actually experienced a rebirth. So during the court auction, pharmaceutical giant Regeneron threw down an initial bid of $256 million, clearly eager to acquire the data for their own drug discovery. But founder Anne Wojcicki successfully petitioned to reopen the auction and ultimately outbid Regeneron with a $305 million offer through her newly formed entity, the TTAM Research Institute. And this brilliantly illustrates the fundamental pivot here. Legacy 23andMe was a for-profit, publicly traded company focused heavily on commercial genetics and drug discovery. The reorganized TTAM, which stands for 23andMe, by the way, is a private, nonprofit, public benefit corporation. Their stated primary goal? To use the genomic research platform as a public good.
Now, we really have to look at this impartially because this transition is fiercely contested. On one side, you have Wojcicki and TTAM's stated philanthropic goal of using AI on this massive data set for public health research. But on the other side, state attorneys general are raising massive red flags, deeply concerned that transferring sensitive genetic data to a brand new entity violates consumer privacy and state genetic data laws.
To push the sale through, Wojcicki's legal team pulled off a pretty clever maneuver, one that was fully approved by the bankruptcy judge. The assets were migrated into a non-debtor subsidiary before the stock purchase. So by keeping the data transfers strictly internal within corporate affiliates, they legally bypassed the third-party data transfer rules that privacy advocates were desperately trying to enforce. As you can imagine, not everyone was super comfortable with that legal maneuvering. Actually, during the bankruptcy and restructuring period, over 2 million concerned users officially opted out, choosing to have their personal genetic data permanently deleted from the servers. And listen, the legal battles are far from over. Literally just weeks ago, in May 2026, the California Attorney General sued the Legacy Holding Company, seeking penalties of $1,000 to $7,500 per privacy violation. With over 850,000 affected Californian users, those potential fines could easily exceed the entire $305 million purchase price. So the crucial takeaway here is that we are navigating completely uncharted territory. This explainer leaves us with a lingering, provocative question to consider as you think about your own digital footprint. When private tech companies fail, who ultimately owns the rights to your DNA?